Welcome, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Melanie Brooks, and I am the audience coordinator at the Bangor Daily News. Welcome to our online event tonight, where we'll be talking about attitudes around wearing a mask and how some people are promoting wearing masks in their communities. I want to begin by thanking our event partner, Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. And I'd also like to take a moment to say hi and thank all of our subscribers in the audience tonight. Your support is allowing our local journalists to dig deeper into our local news, and we all appreciate your support at the BDN. We have three special guests joining us today. I want to thank all of them for their time, and let me introduce all of them one by one. We have Cory King. He is the executive director of the Southern Midcoast Maine Chamber, and he is joining us tonight, and he'll be sharing the outcomes of a statewide survey that his chamber conducted on consumer attitudes around mask wearing and social distancing. Laura Dolce is the director of the Kennebunkport Arundel Chamber of Commerce, and she'll be here talking a little bit about how her chamber has supported their members and promoted mask wearing in her Southern Maine community. And lastly, we have Elizabeth Sutherland from Sutherland Weston Marketing Communications. She worked with the Community Health Leadership Board's 9 partners in Greater Bangor to conceive the campaign Mask Up For Me, and she's going to talk a little bit about that. So without further ado, everyone, I want you to hold tight. I am going to share my screen, and Cory is going to walk us through some of the highlights of his survey. So hold 1 minute and we'll get it up and running. All right, Cory, can you see that?
I can.
And when you're ready for me to switch the slides, just let me know.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Melanie, and thank you everyone else for making it. We will have a chance to do some questions and answers at the end, but if there's anything that's totally glaring that you need to have answered immediately, you can try to flag Melanie, or I don't even know how you would do that.
If you have questions, I would love it if you could leave it in the chat function, and
Perfect.
we will get to them. I promise.
Awesome. Thanks, Melanie. So about 5 weeks ago, I guess 6 weeks ago, we put out a consumer attitude survey about masks and social distancing. And the idea was, we had known just by going on social media and Facebook, and more specifically, that there were some people that were saying things like, I went to this store and I don't want to go to that store again because it wasn't safe. And I had other people sharing other stories. And so we wanted to figure out how prevalent this was, because we think this would be good information for business owners to have. And so I put together a 20-question survey that we ended up sending out, and Laura sent it out in her area, and some other chambers did as well. We were hoping to get 500 respondents in the first, in the week it would open. We had it open from I think a Friday to a Friday. So we were hoping to get 500 respondents to make it statistically significant, and we got over 3,000, or almost 3,000 Mainers that answered, which was a huge number. So let's dig into some of the details.
Great.
All right. So this is kind of telling you what I just told you, that we did a 20-question survey. We got 2,939 responses. York and Cumberland had the most responses, with Penobscot, Kennebunk, and Knox, maybe? Is that okay? No, and those 4 were the top 4. So we broke down the answers by county. We broke down the answers by age group. We broke down the survey by, next slide, please. Oh, okay. And we broke the answers down by knowing somebody who has gotten COVID, and then knowing somebody in the high risk pool. Because one of the questions we wanted to try to answer was knowing somebody with COVID enough to change your attitudes, or was just knowing someone that could be at risk of getting it, was that enough? And so some of the key takeaways from the study, from the 20 questions, and I've got a 31-page report if you want to see it. It breaks it down even further. But 25% of all survey respondents say they've left the business they intended to purchase something at without purchasing it because they felt unsafe due to those around them not practicing safe social distancing. An additional 25% said they would, which is a shocking number. I mean, it ended up being over 50% of the respondents say they have or they would leave a business without purchasing something. One question that you're not going to see here, and it's not on one of our slides, is from a previous survey that we did. So about a month before this survey, Laura and I and some chamber directors did another survey of businesses and asking them what their anticipated losses would be for 2020. And the answer was 52.5%. And so when you add that to this, you've got all these businesses that really need customers. And you really can't force yourself to turn away anybody right now. And we're hearing that 25% of people have left a business or 25% would. Additionally, on the next question, about the same percentage, 25 said they have and 25 said they would not return to that, which is a shock. We did rank all the social distancing categories. We looked at masking for employees, masking for individuals, cleaning of high-touch surfaces, signage on the door, and what was the fourth one? Oh, social distancing, keeping 6 feet apart, and which is the most important. So actually, Melanie, if we can go to that next slide. The one that was the most was 70% said, cleaning of high-touch surfaces was extremely or very important. So that was the highest one. The others were all around 60 or 55%, but still the majority of people said that these things were very important for them. But cleaning of high-touch surfaces was the number one, which actually was a little bit surprising. I thought masks would be higher, but also when you think about it, cleaning of high-touch surfaces is also the thing that people are most familiar with. So maybe that was the reason. Maybe because that's not as new as masks and 69% of respondents feel it is the responsibility of the business to enforce the health and safety protocols within their business, including over 80% of respondents over the age of 60. That's an interesting number because you end up seeing this 31%, anywhere from 20 to 30% going the other way. For the most part, the survey was pro social distancing, pro masking, pro everything. When you see that 31% of people didn't say it's the business responsibility for everything that happens in their business, that's kind of odd for a chamber person to hear, because if there's asbestos, if there's wet floors, if there's outdated meat that they're selling in the store, I mean, if there's all these other health and safety regulations, we would say, well, of course it's the business's responsibility to adhere to those. But for some reason with this, 30% of people are saying, nope, it's not them at all. The other important part here is when we did the age breakdowns, I'm not sure if we have a slide on this, so I'll hit this now. The over 60 age group outscored every other age group by 10 to 15% on each question, which is an incredible margin. In fact, they were the only age group that was above the average on every question, which tells us if you're a business that depends on customers that are 60 and over, you really need to take social distancing in mind. Next slide, please, Mel. The overall results, yes, okay, so this is getting back into how many people thought wearing masks was important. We covered this, the 60% of employees wearing masks, 59% of people thought it was extremely or very important customers to wear masks. So we got that taken care of. Next slide, Mel. Importance of signage, again, around 60% of folks. And again, we see here that 76% of the respondents in the 60 plus age group said that signage was important, extremely or very important, with only 52% of the respondents in the 40 to 50 and the 50 to 59 feeling the same way. So, I mean, you can see just right there how much that older demographic really values this. Next slide, please. Consumers spreading the word. So yeah, this is another interesting one. Yes, we talked about that more than 50% of respondents said they vowed not to return. So 22% of respondents have either posted on social media or told a friend or family member about a specific business or employees at a specific business that when they witness COVID-19 protocols not being adhered to. So And then we have another, I think it was about 8 or 9%. Actually, it might have even been 10%. That's what it was. It was 10%. Because it was a third of respondents have written a social media post or told a friend or family member about unsafe practices. And then the next question asked about, have you talked about customers at a specific business? And it was 32% have and 8% said they would. So it ended up being 40%. So what's that mean? That means if your business is having, if we work backwards, if your business is not following business protocols, you have a 1 in 3 chance that that person's either going to tell a friend about it or they're going to post on social media about it. And if it's customers that are not adhering to the safety guidelines in your store, you have a 4 in 10 chance that they're going to mention customers at your store. And when you're looking at your reputation online or people spreading bad words about you, it doesn't matter if it's the employees or the customers. Either way, they're telling you, your business name is getting associated with bad practices. Next slide.
Well, that's it.
That's it. Okay. The other interesting piece that was in the survey that I really took a lot from is we ended up, and this kind of leads into what Laura and Elizabeth are going to talk to you about community pledges and saying, if there was a community that took a pledge to say our businesses in our area will follow safety guidelines, would you be more likely to shop there and eat there if it's a restaurant? And we asked the question 3 times. We asked and said if that other community was 10 miles away, if that other community was 25 miles away, if that other community was 50 miles away. And to just take one of them, 25% of the people, over 25%, said that they would go 25 miles to work and shop and eat in a safe area. And another 25% said that they would consider it. So when you're talking about 3,000 people, I mean, this is the largest survey of its kind. When you have over 50% of the people saying that they would drive 25 miles, then you start to look at programs that what Laura and Elizabeth have put into place, and they're starting to grab people from outside of their markets and bring them to their market because people care that much about being safe. I guess the last thing I will say, and sorry, I ramble. The last thing I will say is there were questions in the survey. There was 21.4% of people responded to one of the questions saying, if they force me to wear a mask, I'll go somewhere else. And that's true. There are 21 to 25% of people that don't want to wear masks, that hate masks that much. But when we're making policies, when I'm recommending to my businesses what you should be doing, we can't cater to 21% of the population. We need to cater to the other 79%. We need to make our policies inclusive of the 79%. Some businesses will thrive on people that are anti-masking and anti-social distancing. And that's the decision each business has to make. But all businesses can't survive on just 21% of people. They need to try to attract the majority. So,
it's true. So Cory, I know that you've been a chamber director for a long time, and you also sit on the board of Maine's Midcoast and Islands, the regional tourism group in your area. Do you see implementing these strategies as the job of the Chamber of Commerce or somebody else in the community? Who should be leading the charge?
Well, thank you for asking that question. Yes, it's the job of the chambers and or the tourism council. It's those folks that should be promoting this, but ultimately it's up to the business. It's up to the business owner. And I've had some business owners that say, boy, it's really hard when someone comes in and yells at me or someone that doesn't want to spend money and I don't want to push them away. But again, let's go back to one of our first questions, where if somebody doesn't want to wear a mask and you have a masking policy in your business, you can let them in. But we already know that 25% of people say they've left a business because they felt unsafe, and another 25% would. So is that 1 or 2 customers that you're going to let in so they don't cause a scene? Are they going to cost you other customers that are here? And we already know that a third of them are going to tell a friend or family member, and 40% of them are going to talk about the customers at your store. So is it really worth it to cater to 1 or 2 people and cost yourself all of these other businesses? It's the same thing I tell people that don't believe in masks and want to go out to a business and support a friend, where they say, yeah, I'm going to go into Frank's restaurant. I'm not going to wear a mask in there because I don't believe in it. Well, you're hurting Frank's business because 50% of the people said they'll leave if you do that. So there are ways that we can actively hurt each other. And so it's the responsibility of the business. If the business doesn't want to enforce it, some of them will still thrive and on that slim 21%, but most people won't.
I've had a couple of questions about how to deal with people who don't want to wear a mask. And I promise you, I want to get through asking Laura and Elizabeth some questions, but that is a question that we will touch on a little bit later on in the event. So just hold tight. I know it's a really popular question, but we will get to it. Cory, thank you for that. That was a lot of really great information. In the follow-up email that I'll send out, I can send a link to Cory's study for everyone to do a deep dive into. But I wanted to move on to Laura and ask her a couple of questions. Her chamber created the Kennebunkport Promise, and I wanted her to tell us a little bit about what that is and how it came about.
Sure. So it actually came about from an idea that the town manager in Kennebunkport had in putting together a hospitality task force. Kennebunkport, obviously, our hospitality industry is really important to us. And so Lori Smith, who's our town manager, got a number of folks together, including Tina Gordon from the Nonantum and Deb Lennon from Sandy Pines and Vinegar Hill, and said, let's get a group together. It included us, it included retail and other businesses, and see what you come up with. And it was probably the most effective group in the shortest amount of time that I've worked with. They came up with an incredible policy that goes beyond CDC regulations and state requirements and puts out for employees, for residents, as well as visitors, something called the Kennebunkport Promise. We have a website, kptpromise.com, and it outlines everything from cleaning procedures at hotels to seating procedures at restaurants to how retail establishments will deal with everything. So it's got sort of an inward facing piece that all these businesses, and I don't know, I'm not even sure what number we're up to now, 150 businesses. So these businesses have all signed on to it, and they've pledged that they're going to follow all those rules that go beyond. It's a pledge that they've made to their employees that they're going to keep them safe. It's a pledge we've made to the community, because obviously a lot of people here are concerned. A lot of our folks took Cory's survey, and they're concerned too that, gosh, if we have millions of tourists coming, what's going to happen? So it's a pledge to them, and it's a pledge to the people who visit here that, as Cory mentioned, it was important to people to come to these communities. So our Kennebunkport Promise, we have ads, we have different things that run, and it says, if you come here, we're doing all these things in our power to keep you safe. And one of those things that we're doing is we're wearing masks, and we're asking you to wear masks as well. So that's something that we've done in ads in the newspaper. We have, this is Kenny, who's telling you to stay healthy. He's our little masked lobster. And Kenny, we have big billboards, a couple places in Dock Square, so you can take a photo with Kenny, and a lot of families do with all their masks. And we actually have two different sign versions for all of our businesses that go on their doors that says, we wear a mask to keep you healthy, please wear one to keep ours. And then there's a block that businesses could fill in that says, if you can't wear a mask, here's a phone number, here's after hours, here's our online, to try to keep the customer service piece there, but to say, you gotta wear a mask. And then this is our biggie, because this is us bringing sexy back. That is Dr. McDreamy, Patrick Dempsey, who is our very proud resident now of Kennebunkport, who one of our members told him we were doing this, and I was driving home with my Hannaford to-go order, and I pick up my cell, which I wasn't going to pick up because I thought, I don't really know anyone in California. And this voice said, hi, Laura, it's Patrick Dempsey. So that was kind of like a highlight of my life. I just want to put that out there for everyone. But we were very fortunate that he was willing to do this. I see my other colleague, Laura, on here, who put together posters. We've got 4 different posters of Patrick. We've done a lot of social media around Patrick. So we're very fortunate that we did have the sort of that masked man face out there. We printed a lot of these. People come and take photos with the posters. People come and pick up copies. And again, our businesses have hung them up all over town. So it's kind of added like a little extra fun thing for people. But, you know, the Kennebunkport promise is around some pretty serious health things. But at the same time, we've got this button campaign, we've got the posters, we've got the website. And I think that we are seeing people respond to that, to see that level of safety and feeling like they can come here. Some of our businesses have just done extraordinary things. And we've been fortunate to continue working with the town of Kennebunkport on that educational piece, so that we communicate that through our newsletters, we communicate that to everything that goes out to the tourists. And that's been really, you know, a positive and yet fun thing to do at the same time.
So I've been to both of your websites, and I will share them with everyone in a follow-up email. You have a wealth of information on the websites. And so I'm wondering if you can talk to me a little bit about, you have a team of 3, I believe. Can you talk to me a little bit about the effort that it's taken to stay on top of the guidelines, the changes to those guidelines, and business resources during this time?
Absolutely. So we started a cloning program maybe around March. No, I'm kidding. I was explaining before that 2 of us have journalism backgrounds. So apparently working through a pandemic is just like working on a breaking news story. And I think every chamber director in the state really was just put in a position to digest huge amounts of material and put that together. We were very lucky that the MACE organization, the Maine Association of Chamber Executives, met twice a week in the beginning, so we could all bounce ideas off each other and work together and understanding that. But not to take anything away from our crew, because they really, we worked a lot of hours, but we were also really fortunate that there are people in the community who were very passionate about it. So the hotel folks looked at every best practice from, you know, major international chains down to, you know, smaller groups elsewhere. So we were fortunate, you know, that the internet provided us with a lot of those answers, that people had good connections. So we were able to kind of gather and amass that, you know, and I think this is also a time where people were good about coming together and sharing. You know, the chamber directors, we shared everything that we had with each other. And you know, you're able to do a little stealing here and there and make a few adjustments, and you know, that's all to the better for all of us here in Maine. And I think that we're a small enough community in Maine that we could make that happen and do it successfully, and there was no one saying, wait a second, they stole that from us. And you know, we had chamber directors who said, I took everything you did in the Kennebunkport promise and I put the name of my town at the top. How are you about that? And you know, that was awesome. We all did that. And to have those resources and, you know, be able to just reach out to folks was huge.
That's great. There's another question I want to ask you about a webinar, but I'm going to wait and ask Elizabeth a couple questions and we'll come back to it. So Elizabeth, the Community Health Leadership Board in Greater Bangor is a partnership between our local healthcare providers, human service organizations, and the city of Bangor. So can you explain a little bit about what your role is on this team and what Mask Up For Me is?
Sure, I would be happy to. So the Community Health Leadership Board, as we affectionately call CHLB, because in healthcare and in municipalities, they love their acronyms, so we use it. The CHLB came to us shortly after the need to shelter in place became obvious, and asked us to begin talking to them about helping to create some messaging around how the local healthcare organizations and the city of Bangor were working together to sort of address the pandemic. And from that evolved the need to wear masks. And so we were asked to help them develop some messaging, a campaign that really pushes information out to the public that is focused on wearing a mask and being socially distant or physically distant. So we did some brainstorming with the leaders of our local hospitals, human service agencies, the Bangor school system, and in partnership with all of them, as well as the United Way of Eastern Maine, who truly stepped up to help in a great way, we created a campaign designed to help normalize mask wearing. So this is a difficult thing to do. It's not something we've ever had to do. It was last needed to do in our country in 1918. So there are very few people alive who remember this in any reasonable way. So and the world was completely different. So even tactics that maybe worked 100 years ago don't necessarily work in the age of Zoom, right? So we developed a three-pronged approach. So we had three strategies that were designed to help us encourage mask wearing adoption. So those were highlighting local influencers, peers, because we know that people respond to people who look just like them, people who look just like us, people we know. So we really worked to identify local influencers, local leaders, not necessarily elected officials or heads of businesses, although they were incorporated into this campaign, but also people who had a sphere of influence in their circle. So families that were really involved in soccer and had kids throughout the age ranges that would be recognized by other soccer families. Families that were swimming with the Wise Barracuda swim team and would be recognized. And we started using those folks wearing a mask on social media, saying, "This is why I mask up for me." And it was really popular. We also wanted to champion mask wearing as part of our current normal. I hate to call it a new normal because I don't think it's here to stay, right? By offering some fun, friendly reminders, because we knew another way that you encourage people to adopt change is through humor. A lot of us get through the pandemic with a little bit of humor on the side. And so we've created a series of videos that sort of poke fun at ourselves in a very gentle way, or provide a little bit of laugh when it comes to masking up or staying socially distant. And then finally, we also know that some people really respond to facts and figures and science, and they want to understand why this is important. So we've also peppered in a number of statistics and graphs and science-based information that people can take a look at and make decisions for themselves because they feel like they have all of the same information that our local healthcare experts have. So packaging that all up together and pushing that out in a very fast way, which is why we really focused on social media, because it's a quick way to reach people, especially when most of us were still sheltering in place.
That's great. And I dropped in the CHLB's Mask Up For Me page in the chat section. So
Great.
Elizabeth, you're not like a chamber director. You're working on the marketing of this program. I'm assuming that Cory and Laura have people calling them all the time, asking questions or telling them something that happened or complaining about someone that walked into the store. How do you gauge the success of Mask Up For Me when you're not getting that sort of feedback from the community?
So one of the things that we do sort of as an advertising agency is we try to focus on using statistics, data points. We really like our numbers to sort of figure out how a campaign is doing. But when we're moving this rapidly, when we have to institute sort of a global change this quickly, we can't always depend on the facts and figures because sometimes they are months behind the decision making that we're doing. So we have really worked on a process that's twofold. One, we are really monitoring our reach and our frequency. So we do know fairly instantly how many people, unique people, are we reaching and how many times are they seeing our messages. And we know from sort of communication theory that that's one of the best ways to get people to raise the awareness of people of a particular subject matter. And so the higher the reach, the more the frequency of the message that they hear, the more likely it is that they'll remember it. There's a sort of classic advertising trope that says that you have to see a Tide commercial 18 times before you realize that Tide is offering a new and improved Tide, right? And it is somewhat true. It takes us a while to see things before we recognize it as something familiar and understandable to us. The other thing that we've done is purely anecdotal, right? We have I go to the grocery store, which I have to do after this call, and I count how many people are wearing a mask. And so before, when we first started this campaign, I was counting how many people were wearing a mask. And now my mental count is how many people are not wearing a mask. And so it's those anecdotal moments that allow us to see that we are, in fact, instituting some change, even though it's fairly rapid.
I agree with you. I was actually at the grocery store this weekend, and there were only 2 people not wearing a mask, and they stuck out. They stuck out to me. So something that the 3 of us have sort of talked about before this meeting is how to deal with people that just don't want to wear a mask. And Laura did something really interesting at her chamber. She had a webinar about de-escalation techniques, and I would love for her to talk to me a little bit about how that came about and what people thought of the webinar and what people took away from it.
Absolutely. We are fortunate to partner with the Kennebunkport Business Association and the Kennebunk Police Department on that. We've been hearing, especially in the very beginning of the mask mandate, we heard from several of our businesses that had kind of really ugly experiences, including one where a man came in with a gun to prove a point about not wearing a mask. And so you know, and waitresses being yelled at for, you know, people having to wear masks to and from the tables and contact tracing, and, you know, all of the businesses kind of being put into a different position with the masks, with the contact tracing, you know, with having to get people to sign affidavits. And so we were very fortunate that Detective Stephen Borst with KPD came on and really gave our businesses practical points on how to handle this, how to de-escalate people. You know, first asking all of the business owners to make sure that there was a chain of command, because as we talked about, you don't want some poor, you know, 16-year-old waitress to be the one to have to really enforce things. So if they saw that someone was escalating, if they saw someone was refusing to kind of comply, knowing who the frontline manager was who was handling that for that shift, knowing that that was their responsibility to come in, you know, to have a kind of a calm talk with them, not to right away kind of go at them and be, you know, you're an idiot, put your mask on, but just to say, you know, it's a tough time, but here's, you know, here's what we're asked to mandate, you know, and we don't want to close our business and we've got to keep our employees safe. So, you know, I'm asking you to kind of follow through. And he gave them some really nice practical tips that I think people found really important. And then as the weeks have gone on, because we put it out on YouTube, we're actually seeing more and more people go back to it from our area and elsewhere, because those conversations aren't ending. We've actually had almost a few in the opposite direction, where we had someone, you know, who claimed she had health issues and ended up kind of surrounded at a local grocery store with people saying, put the mask on. So, you know, we're just trying to kind of help people, other than the, you know, for God's sakes, be kind. I mean, we've seen so much kind of meanness, but just, you know, really teaching people at businesses, here's how to handle it. Here's when it gets to a certain point, like if your customer has pulled a gun, you know, step back behind somewhere and call the police. You know, here's the point where you need to call in someone beyond who's sitting here in your business. But, you know, the vast majority of times, just kind of taking someone maybe 5 feet away from a table or 5 feet away from where this has happened, talking it through, explaining kind of what you're experiencing on their side, validating that they have concerns on theirs, and then, you know, moving toward compliance seemed to be the best thing. And it does seem to actually be working. You know, businesses felt they need that. And now I think they feel a little better armed to handle those situations.
How about you, Cory? What do you have to add to the conversation? I'm sure you have some feelings from your neck of the woods on this.
Well, you know, the biggest thing for me is businesses don't like being put in that situation, but that's the responsibility that comes with being a business owner. And a few things you can do. One of the things that people miss out on, and what Laura and Elizabeth's programs are so great about, is it's a community-based program. And the great part about that is it's really easy to ignore a federal mandate. It's a bit harder to ignore a state mandate, but it gets really difficult to ignore a community mandate when they say, hey, these neighboring businesses are all doing this. Why aren't you doing this? It's a lot easier to be like, you know what, you know, that's why I'm doing it. It also gets us back to the wisdom of group decision making, where if you're a business that's uncomfortable with it, if you don't feel comfortable enough, and you should feel comfortable enough to say, this is my place of business, this is the rules in my place of business. I'm sorry if you don't adhere to those, but this is what we require, just like no shirt, no shoes, no service. Masking is something we believe in. If you don't feel strongly enough to say that, then if you have one of these community initiatives, you can say, hey, could you help me out? Our entire community has gotten behind this safe masking program, and I don't want another one of the business owners coming in and seeing you without a mask, because then I get in trouble with, the people. And that's another way you can handle it. I've talked to a couple people that talked about, I had someone who was not the most physically imposing person say, oh no, it's fine. There's Mike at the barber shop next door, and he said if anyone gives me trouble about masks, just to call him and he'll come over from next door, and if I'm not feeling safe. And it's ridiculous that we've gotten to the point where you have to have your neighbors be your bouncers in your business. But that's where we are. I'm with that. So, but I think relying on the community part of that, saying, hey, I'm just a business trying to get along with everyone else in the community, and this is what my community is going for, so that's why I need to do this, is a really nice way for people to do that. The other thing we need to remember too, though, is everyone is under so much pressure right now that it doesn't take much to set them off. And that's why Laura's de-escalation is really good, because talking about the words you use, talking about the nonverbals that you put across so that you're not threatening to somebody else, and that sort of thing is very important.
Elizabeth and Laura, I'm wondering if each of Mask Up For Me and the Kennebunkport Promise have signs for businesses to put in their businesses, and what the feedback has been from that.
So we do. We have a window clings that say that we're a proud partner of Mask Up For Me, so that businesses have something that, just as Cory suggested, helps bring that community effort into the individual retail store or place of business. The other thing that we're working on here in Greater Bangor are sidewalk stickers that talk about masking and being socially distant, that are going in high traffic foot areas, so that they are part of the CHLB's Mask Up For Me campaign, but they're not tied to any specific business. And that helps reinforce that this is a community-wide initiative and not just dependent on the owner of the bagel place that you're about to go into, right? One of the things that I think is really important to keep in mind is that the reason that we're receiving pushback is based on some psychological issues or initiatives, concerns, right? There's a fear of change, and there's a fear of the lack of control that individual has. And we, as Cory said, we are in the middle of life-altering, highly stressful situation. So everybody's on edge. And we're asking them to do something that's very different and uncomfortable from both a physical and mental standpoint. So it's important to remember that as we're talking to folks about and asking them to wear a mask. One of the things that we've encouraged so the Greater Bangor Chamber and the Greater Bangor Visitors and Conventions Bureau and the CHLB worked together on a de-escalation webinar as well. And one of the things that we talked about in that is really using words that address those issues in psychology. If I bring you into my circle and I say, I know this probably is frustrating for you, but if you could just please help me out because it's my responsibility. Asking for somebody's accommodation for you personally changes behavior. It's really hard for them to be angry at you. It's really easy for them to yell about the governor, who in that particular moment may be faceless to them. So those are some of the ways that we're encouraging people to address the bullying that's taking place.
And if I could piggyback on that, we too have masks available in the community. We have some free mask stations and hand sanitizing stations in our heavy shopping areas. The town put that together with one of the CARES grants, so that's been really helpful, so that if people don't have masks or if they've forgotten them or things like that, so they're readily available. Every store, every kind of business you go to, you will see the Kenny poster, the Patrick Dempsey poster. There are window clings as well for the Kennebunkport Promise. So I think, like Cory said, it's hard when you go into a community and you see so very much community compliance and the community really working together. I think the messaging is consistent and it's really in your face. So if you show up, all of our businesses have major signage on the front doors. They have signage on sandwich boards. The town really worked to kind of loosen up some of those ordinances, and you've had to walk past. Now it happens. We laugh. It happens at our own building. People have walked past every circle, sandwich boards, everything to get to where they are. But there's a lot of messaging. So you have to, be pretty determined not to see it, to not see it. And I do think that helps. I think it says, gosh, this community has embraced this in a different way, and I need to comply if I want to be here.
Two other pieces. One is, if you see a business that's doing it right, that is enforcing it, that is, do have their employees and their customers following it, put that post out on Facebook. Compliment that business. I would love to see my Facebook feed flooded with, I just went to Hannaford and I had the best experience because everybody was wearing a mask and I felt so safe. That's a great way that you can help businesses, you can help get the message across. The other thing is, if somebody says, and Laura alluded to this, I can't wear a mask because I have medical reasons why I can't wear a mask, the business owner has every right to say, well, that's great. Unfortunately, you need to wear a mask to be in here, but we have curbside service for you. We can bring things, out to your business. But to have you in here, I can't have that. It goes against our protocols and policies. I'm so sorry, but we can certainly help service your needs another way. And it's not being discriminatory. It's just saying that we have a policy. I mean, if I couldn't put a shirt on for some reason, it doesn't mean that I can just go into a business shirtless and say, well, I can't put a shirt on. There are rules in place and things that we need to be aware of.
And to that point, Cory, we do have a lot of photos of businesses in our area that have worn all the masks. We've asked them to send them, kind of like Elizabeth said, some of our influencers. So we do have every couple of days photos of those people wearing masks, of an entire crew from a hotel wearing a mask, and we celebrate that. We don't allow the no mask shaming posts or the business shaming posts on our social. We ask you to privately message us, which we take all of those and we address them directly with the businesses. But we don't want to see a big thread that says ABC business, I was in there today and I saw, the owner take his mask down for a second. Don't go in there, because we were seeing a lot of that in early days. And I think now it's so much nicer to celebrate the businesses that are really doing it right and really work to educate the few that aren't maybe there yet.
So we are also working at the CHLB level because the group is really focused on the health and well-being of our community as a whole. The initiative that we're really starting to dig into right now is the back to school with masks sort of situation. And we know that this is, it's hard enough to make sure that adults are able to adapt and swing quickly, but how do we help kids and families get ready for wearing a mask every day to school? So we are working on messaging that's really talking about how parents need to lead by example, that they need to really educate their kids that COVID-19 is real and that masks do work. And then we are encouraging parents to advocate for social awareness even at a young age. So we're saying to them, let your kids know that they too are responsible for the well-being of their friends. I mean, that's an age-appropriate message. You have to frame it correctly depending on the age, but you want to raise good kids who are kind and generous. And so this is one way that they can do that. And then also encouraging kids to hold one another accountable and to encourage one another to wear their masks and wash their hands. And again, that's an age-appropriate message. Like, you don't want to turn your kiddos into tattletales. You want to make sure that they are doing this in an encouraging way. I have some of those, so I know how that works. But inevitably, the mask wearing effort and the comfort with it starts at home. So by talking to the parents about how to put these messages out to their kids, we're also then able to encourage that behavior in the parents with one another by being good role models.
And thinking a little bit about making masks more of a normal daily activity, um, do you in the community feel like when the big box stores like Walmart and Target and Lowe's and Home Depot start making the same mandates and putting signs out, does that help the downtown business communities as well and making it more of a normal ask?
For sure. Yeah, no, I think it does. I think the one thing, and I saw Joel Holcomb's question in the chat, and one of the things that I'm hearing about, I've been in the chamber work for about 14 years. And so I've got chamber directors that are friends all over the state, and they regularly check in with me. And so one of the things that's very frustrating that I'm hearing is that particularly some of the chain stores have different levels of consistency depending on geographically where they are in the state. And so the Walmart in Brunswick is different than the Walmart in Waterville, which is different than the Walmart in Bangor with how strict they are. And that's one of the worst things that a business can do because it doesn't send across that consistent message of, yes, we all believe in this, we all believe in this, the same level. And so it's really, it's unfortunate when it's somebody that is, you know, younger employee that's at the front door getting yelled at and that sort of thing. But that's also the business's responsibility, is to put someone in that position that is able to handle that pushback and is able to still get across that consistent message. Because really, we need everyone on the same page so we can finally get rid of this virus.
I think conversely, though, sort of the lack of early compliance by some of the big box stores helped to drive more business to the Main Street shops. I know our local hardware store, who has insisted on masks from the beginning, has lines, you know, all the way to the back of the store, socially distanced, you know, all day, every day. And yet we were hearing more complaints about some of the big box home improvement stores who didn't maybe come to the mask conclusion as soon as some of the others. So, you know, when you talk about people really depending on, deciding on where to shop based on the safety level they felt, I do think a lot of people are feeling safe with some of those Main Street businesses because they are taking it seriously and they're handling it differently, you know, than maybe some of the large national chains are. So.
Oh, for sure. And I think it's easier to make policy changes in a 5 to 10 person small business where the owner is on site than
Absolutely.
it is at a multinational, you know, corporation. And so that's part of that too. I mean, one of the things that in the chamber world is we don't have preferred businesses over others. You know, we like the box stores as much as we like the Main Street stores, and they all provide something different. But I do think you're right. It did help the early adapters, the ones that moved and put these policies in place first. And I know Brunswick in particular was one of these communities that took it serious from the jump. And I know that helped them for sure.
So both Laura and Elizabeth worked with a really big group of people to sort of pull off their campaign in a really quick way. Have either of you ever created something so quickly with such a large group of people before? What was that like to work with that?
So there are, it's funny because I've had this conversation multiple times. This is fairly classic crisis communications in that you have some sort of instant crisis that you have to address, and you need to work with all of the audiences and the stakeholders very quickly to come to a reasonable conclusion. And so we really borrowed heavily on classic crisis communications procedures in order to develop a campaign. But unlike a natural disaster like a flood or a fire, or a corporate incident like an explosion, like the explosion in Beirut, for example, we didn't have any sort of knowledge or understanding of how long this was going to last. And the science has been changing so rapidly with as people are learning more and more about this disease, that we're really struggling to continue to adapt our campaign and our messaging to meet where we are right now. So what we've asked for from our group is a whole lot of grace, that we're not going to get everything right, and that we have to have some patience with one another, but also with the understanding that we cannot be behind this, or we will be never able to catch up. But if we get too far in front of this, we're going to make decisions that seem right, but are not correct by the time we learn more going forward. So we are every day spending a significant amount of time just making sure we're in the right place at the right time for today.
And I think for us, you know, we didn't think of it in those terms initially. We thought of it as breaking news because, again, we came from a news background, only to find out later from one of our members that that actually is what crisis communications looks like. So we were feeling pretty good about it. We had a really kind of a high-powered number of, you know, movers and shakers in the community who were really committed to getting this right, to being one of those communities that was out in front, that, you know, people who took on their sectors and researched them for hours and hours, and, you know, just really committed to that quick turnaround. And I think when you have that kind of level of commitment and all the right people in a room, no matter how short a time you have, you're going to come up with something really great. We had some incredible creative out of the box folks who you know, just were willing to put funds and ideas and everything behind it. So, and we were lucky that the town just said, run with it, show us what you think is the right thing to do. So we just had kind of a confluence of really good things happen at once. And you know, and Elizabeth said, you have to keep adjusting and keep changing. And I think the group we have is really committed to doing that moving forward. So just really lucky that everyone was in that right place at the wrong time, I guess, but the right time to make this happen.
So we have, oh, go ahead, Cory.
No, I just wanted to jump in real quick on 2 points. One, the point that Elizabeth makes about change and accepting change is such a critical point, which no one's really talking about. The idea that the science changes, that's how science works. I mean, we thought the world was flat until we found out it wasn't. And so we need to be able to adapt when new things come along. This is a novel coronavirus. And as things change, we need to be open to that change. But we also need to have leaders that are open to that change. So one of the critical questions I'm going to look at when evaluating candidates coming this fall is who is accepting of change, who is not stuck in their position, who's willing to listen to the other side, because I think that's going to be very critical going forward. Number 2, I'll say one of my big regrets actually is that we didn't come up with a community standard sooner. You know, our group, the Maine Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives, we were meeting, like Laura said, every couple of weeks, but we have never been in this situation before. And so we were not flexible enough, really, to do it all again. I would have loved for all the regional and local chambers to come up with a single message and have all of us promote it at the same time, because I think we could have had incredible impact as a collective. But our organization isn't designed presently in order to do the crisis management that we needed to do. And so actually at our conference, Laura doesn't even know this, but at our conference next month that we're going to, I'm actually going to take part of the agenda and discuss how our organization can be better in these crisis situations, to work together, to use our strength, you know, uniformly when these big issues strike, so that we're more responsive.
That's a really good point, Cory, and leads into another question that I had. You've shared what you wish that you had known or what wish that you had done. Elizabeth is a business owner and Laura is a business leader. Are there things that either of you wish that you had done differently or wish that you had known sooner?
That's a really challenging question, right? So I think, speaking purely for our business, one of the things that I really had to manage was, we have a staff of 17, and some of them are really seasoned professionals who've been around for a while, and some are really new in their professional career. And so they were coming from different mindsets and different comfort levels when it came to accepting risk in the workplace. So we've spent a lot of time talking with individuals personally about their experience, their comfort with um, working remotely or working in the office. We did move back to the office in July for some of our staff, only the ones who were comfortable being here. And it's not been, there's no easy silver bullet. Like, I'm having conversations with staff every week about where their comfort level is, and it changes from day to day. And so there's a lot more human resource effort that I'm putting into this than I think I realized was going to be necessary in mid-March or even in mid-April. I really didn't expect the level of anxiety to be as high as it was and is for some folks. So I think if I had to do it all over again, I would just be a little bit more accepting that not anybody at all was going to be in the exact same place as the next person, and that I had to start with a blank slate with each conversation.
How about you, Laura? Anything on your end?
I think the one regret I have is that we were able to do a lot, and we've continued our relationship working directly with the town of Kennebunkport on all of these efforts, but we represent 3 towns really. We'd like to say we're 3 towns, 1 community. We share a school system, we share a chamber. And the towns themselves were at such different levels in terms of their response and their ideas. And, you know, that 2 of the towns had re-engagement task forces that I served on. One of them kind of has never done anything, which isn't surprising just given the level of municipal involvement. But, you know, in terms of our messaging, we talk to the towns to say, let's put out one message. Let's really come together as one community. And I think that's still a little fractured. Our message is singular and goes out to all the tourists and all the people that we deal with and the residents and the members, and it's all been one message. But the towns themselves, I think sometimes people still get in their silos a little bit. So I guess I wish I had pushed more from day one. The towns kind of said, oh, we've got our own thing going. And so we stepped back and said, let us, you know, figure out our messaging, our education, our marketing. But I almost wish that we had insisted more that those towns come together, because I'd love to see a single message and a single approach, even in how to approach businesses. And that's been like a little bit of a stop-start. You know, I just wish that sometimes leaders themselves could kind of take the walls down a little and work more closely together on sort of regional solutions to that.
And Cory, you wanted to add one thing?
Yeah, and it may seem a little off the point, but the other thing that I wish is I wish we wouldn't have gotten to a point where just because there are 2 sides, we treat 2 sides like they're equal. And so one of the big confusing things with the messaging and with everything is you see a report on the news that says, doctors say you need to wear a mask and social distancing. That's how you're going to beat this. And then someone says, well, I have a friend who talked to a doctor, and that doctor said that the CO2 in the mask is going to kill you. And then people go, well, I don't know. We've got 9 doctors on this hand and 1 doctor over here. I guess we don't really know the answer. And it's like, no, just because there's 2 sides doesn't make the sides equal. And so if 70 or 80 or 90% of people are saying one thing and 10, 20 or 30 are saying something else, maybe we need to look at the majority and go with the majority view on some of these things. Because if one truck driver says, before I do a cross-country trip, I like to take 12 ibuprofen, and then it gets reported that, well, there is some disagreement in the trucking community whether taking 12 ibuprofen before a cross-country trip helps truckers. And it's like, no, there isn't a dispute there. It's a very few number of people that are trying to weigh it out. And I think when it comes to things where we need experts, we need to listen to experts, and science and health is one of those things.
Well, it is 6 o'clock. I wanted to thank you all for coming, and thank you to Laura, Elizabeth, and Cory. This was a really great conversation, and you're all from different parts of the state, and I know you're all dealing with different problems and different issues depending on where you are. but I really appreciate your time for coming and sharing with us tonight. So with that, I will say good night to all of you and thank you for coming.
Thank
And
you, Melanie.
I look forward to seeing you at other events this month. Good night, everybody.